afternoon. And thank you very much for coming.
It has been a bad week for the Trump legal team that actually right now is holding a press conference that is so bananas we can't even bring it to you because it's just so full of BS.
So let's start with the specifics. Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, the margin of victory now for Biden, which is not a victory, it's a fraud, is 69,140 votes. The reality is that we are now at a count of 682,770 ballots, for which we have affidavits that there was no inspection of that ballot at the time that it was entered in the vote.
No one has come up with any evidence of fraud or abuse.
It was a mail ballot. Mail ballots are particularly prone to fraud. We were warned about that by Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, and Secretary Baker in a report about a dozen years ago, in which they said that mail balloting is particularly susceptible of fraud, that we should very carefully consider ever doing it, and that it can be taken advantage of. Justice Souter warned us of the same thing in a comment in an election law case.
There's no issues of fraud anywhere.
And even the New York Times wrote articles about how dangerous mail-in voting was. And this is the first time we ever did it en masse, and I think we proved that all three are prophets. It's not only susceptible to fraud, it is easily susceptible to fraud, particularly if you have a plan or scheme which sounds eerily similar to what Joe Biden told us a few days before the election, that he had the best voter fraud team in the world.
Secondly, we're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our administration, the President Obama's administration before this. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
Well, they were good. I don't know that they were that good because they made significant mistakes, like all crooks do, and we caught them. One of them was pushing out Republican inspectors.
So, Steve, Neil Cavuto, a person with a conscience who understands not just that those are flagrant lies, there have been Trump observers in where all of the counting is ongoing.
You're not letting me in? Well, what? No. That's why I tell you, call the police. Do it. If you legal, call the cops.
The city guy is using the bathroom. He'll be there. Call that number. Tell him to call somebody.
I have a citywide watcher certificate.
Observers were allowed in vote counting stations.
It's not for this location.
No, it's not for this. It is not. Is this the city of Philadelphia? This is the city of Philadelphia. This is the city of Philadelphia. This is the city of Philadelphia. You wanted to talk. You wanted to talk outside. Let's talk. I have a watcher certificate. I asked you to read the line. The line said it's good in every ward and division in the city.
Every state, almost every civilized country, even Tanzania and places you wouldn't think of, have rules about inspectors, particularly for mail-in ballots. And why particularly for mail-in ballots? Because they can more easily be defrauded, and you can't check on it. Up until the mass cheating that went on in this election, a Republican and a Democrat inspector, as well as others, if there are other parties, is allowed to watch the unsealing of this ballot.
About Democrats, they cheated. It was a fraudulent election, which drew applause from the audience there. Again, not true. This was not a fraudulent election, and there's no evidence of that.
Because the only time you can ever find out if it's a fraudulent ballot is when it is looked at. The minute you approve this, it's thrown away, gone for eternity. The only thing left is the vote. That could have been Mickey Mouse. That could have been a dead person. That could have been not filled out properly. That could have been the same person 30 times. That could have been, and all these things have happened, by the way. That could have been nothing filled out. We'd never know. So, for example, the recount being done in Georgia will tell us nothing. because these fraudulent ballots will just be counted again because they wouldn't supply the signatures to match.
Those numbers don't legally add up for Trump. So that means even if he won some pending case, it's still game over in the election.
For example, in Pennsylvania, where we have probably our most precise evidence, 682,770 of these ballots were cast, put in, and they weren't inspected, which renders them ballots that are null and void, cannot be counted, have to be removed from the vote.
He made a bunch of allegations about fraud, again, without any evidence.
Why? For several reasons, not the least of which is that was basically only one of two places in the state where it was done. So in the other parts of the state, there was a legitimate inspection of the ballots. So if you have two different standards in different parts of the state, one favoring one part of the state, the other disfavoring the other part of the state, that's a classic violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. Bush v. Gore being the most recent case that teaches that. That's not the only fraud that went on in Pennsylvania. All of the other frauds carried out in the other states by the Democrat bosses happened there as well. For example, if you made a mistake in that ballot and you lived in Philadelphia or in Pittsburgh, you were allowed to fix the mistake.
The votes will continue to be counted until every valid mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, and provisional ballot is counted. So while some, including the president, continue to spew baseless claims of fraud, claims for which his team has not produced one iota of evidence, what we have seen here in Philadelphia is democracy, pure and simple.
But if you lived in what would be considered more Republican or Trump parts of the state, you were given no such right. One of our plaintiffs, Mr. Henry, cast an absentee ballot, and he failed to put it in the secure envelope inside. He just put it in open, naked. That ballot was cast aside because it was invalid, because that breaks the privacy of the vote. In Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia, if they noticed that there wasn't an inner envelope, they'd contact the voter and allow him to vote again. Or if he didn't fill it out completely, or if he made a mistake and didn't sign his full name, he was allowed to cure it. There is no such provision under the law of Pennsylvania. The Democrat Secretary of State made that up in order to maximize the votes in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and to minimize the votes in the other parts of the state. Clearly illegal, clearly voter fraud, easily provable, hundreds of witnesses, maybe thousands.
When Donald Trump also wanted to talk up prosecuting voter fraud, which didn't exist, wasn't found in a way that changes this race.
We have, to give you another example, we have 17,000 provisional ballots cast in Pittsburgh. Do you know what a provisional ballot is? Provisional ballot usually happens this way, and about 15 of the 17,000 happen this way. You walk in and you say, "I'm here to vote today." "Oh, Mr. Giuliani, you already voted." "I did? I don't remember voting." "Oh, yes, you cast an absentee ballot." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." So why does that happen 17,000 times in Pittsburgh? People walked in thinking actually 15,000 to be precise. Why did it happen 15,000 times that people in Pittsburgh walked in to vote and they had already voted according to the Democrat election machine?
The president-elect is the president, and Donald Trump is acting like a two-bit criminal.
He wanted to do crime. Brings me no joy as a reporter or American to say that that's what the evidence shows. The president wanted to do election crimes specifically.
We now have a president manufacturing. He is the fraud. The fraud is now the president.
Did they forget? That many people with bad memories in Pittsburgh? Or is the following correct? That as witnesses will testify, they were instructed by the Democrat bosses when they had a ballot in which there was no one registered, just assign it to somebody. Just assign it to Rudy Giuliani. So when maybe Rudy Giuliani won't show up to vote. And if he does show up to vote, we'll give him a provisional ballot. That is what we call circumstantial evidence of the fraud. The direct evidence of the fraud are the people who will testify that, in fact, that's what happened to them, as well as the 50 to 60 witnesses we have for the way they were treated and not allowed to inspect the ballots. They weren't just not allowed to do it. They were pushed. A few cases they were assaulted. In all cases, they were put in a corral so far away, probably the closest they got is from here to the back of that room. They couldn't see a thing. Now, I don't know. You're going to tell me that 60 people are lying? They didn't just tell me this. They swore under penalty of perjury, which is something no Democrat's ever done. You don't even ask Biden about this. You don't put him under penalty of perjury. He doesn't even get asked questions about it. He doesn't get asked questions about all the evidence of the crimes that he committed. These people are under penalty of perjury. Their names are on an affidavit. They swear that they weren't allowed to carry out their function as inspectors. And it's not just a technical thing. There's a reason they did it. Why would you not allow people to carry out the function they've been allowed to do for 50 years, 60 years? Why wouldn't you allow inspections of those ballots? Because you knew you were going to use those ballots to catch Biden up. And you had a big road ahead of you. You had to catch him up for 700,000 to 800,000 votes that he was behind. And the only way you were going to do it was with the mail-in ballots. You couldn't have a Democrat and Republican inspector around. They don't even have Democrats watching it, because they'd be afraid that there'd be honest Democrats who would say, you're cheating.
They now want to front-run fraud issues without proof. Even Mitch McConnell, refusing to recognize President-elect Biden's victory, he wouldn't contradict Trump's lies that the election was stolen from him, but he didn't have any proof to offer. He didn't say he saw any proof. He offers nothing but more poison politics. You want proof of that? Before his remarks, McConnell met with Attorney General Bill Barr, and guess what happened then? Soon after, Barr authorized federal prosecutors across America to pursue, quote, any substantial allegations of voting irregularities before the election is certified, despite zero evidence. Again, you have to keep saying that because this isn't how it works. If you think something happened, you prove it. Are irregularities even crimes? And what substantial allegations?
So that takes us to Michigan, where there was an honest Democrat who said they were cheating. And we'll show you her affidavit, because I know you keep reporting falsely that we have no evidence, that we have no specific acts of fraud. That's because the coverage of this has been almost as dishonest as the scheme itself. The American people are entitled to know this. You don't have a right to keep it from them. You don't have a right to lie about it. And you are. I mean, you don't report to them that a citizen of this country, a very fine woman, who is willing to allow me to give you her name. I can't give you all these affidavits, because if I do, these people will be harassed. They'll be threatened. They may lose their job. They will lose their friends. We've lost lawyers in this case because they've been threatened. We've had lawyers that need protection. What's going on in this country is horrible, and the censorship that you're imposing is making it worse.
And this is simply after William Barr issued a memo to federal prosecutors saying you can investigate possible election crimes here. But he also included other limitations, like it has to be a case that will change the outcome in a state, which we know is not out there. That case isn't going to be found.
But Jesse Jacob is an adult citizen and a resident of the state of Michigan. She's been an employee of the city of Detroit for decades. I know her age, but she can tell you her age. She was assigned to voting duties in September, and she was trained by the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. She was basically trained to cheat. She said that I was instructed by my supervisor to adjust the mailing date of these absentee ballot packages to be dated earlier than when they were actually sent in. The supervisor made that announcement for all workers to engage in that fraudulent practice. That's not me saying that. That's just American citizens saying that under oath. I don't know. Maybe you could say she's lying, but you can't say there's no evidence. This is what we call evidence. This is direct evidence.
And while Joe Biden looks forward, President Trump is pushing unsubstantiated claims of election fraud.
That's circumstantial. I tried many, many cases, as did all my colleagues here. You put a witness on a witness stand, the witness is testifying to their own knowledge. This witness goes on the witness stand and she will say, I was told to adjust the date on the absentee ballots. I witnessed election workers and employees going over to the voting booths with voters in order to watch them vote and coach them for whom to vote. Completely illegal. She will testify to that. I don't know. Biden's people can cross-examine her, but you can't just throw it away. Gee, there's no evidence. Next time you say that, you'll be lying. Because there is evidence. This, oh, by the way, this is public. You can all get it. It's attached to the complaint in Costantino versus the city of Detroit.
There's no evidence of systemic fraud in the election.
Then she was instructed by my supervisor not to ask for a driver's license or any photo ID when a person was trying to vote. Don't ask for identification. Why would you not ask for identification? Because you knew that a lot of people not entitled to vote were going to come in and early vote. Because you knew that illegal immigrants were going to be allowed to vote. You knew, if you lived in Philadelphia, unless you're stunad, that's an Italian expression for stupid, unless you're stupid, you knew that a lot of people were coming over from Camden to vote. They do every year. Happens all the time in Philly. It's about as frequent as getting beaten up at a Philadelphia Eagle football game. Happens all the time. All the time. And it's allowed to happen because it is a Democrat, corrupt city. And has been for years. Many, many years. And they carried it out in places they could get away with it. They didn't carry it out in neutral places. They didn't carry it out in Republican places. They didn't carry it out where the law is respected. They carry it out in a corrupt city where the district attorney releases criminals en masse, which is why it has so much crime. She also said, I observed a large number of people who came to the satellite location to vote in person, but they had already applied for and submitted an absentee ballot. So she observed a lot of people voting twice.
The situation on the ground is math and reality. I mean, I don't know how else to convince anybody other than math and reality.
Again, this is Jesse Jacob, not me. I was instructed not to invalidate any ballots and not to look for any deficiency in the ballots.
To be clear, there have been no credible allegations of fraud that would affect the outcome of the election in any of the states. None. This is happening at a pure spite.
This is an instruction from the election commissioner or the employer to the worker. Don't look for any deficiencies in the ballots. I was instructed not to look at any of the signatures the absentee ballots. If she was instructed to not to look for any of the signatures on the absentee ballots, why the heck do you sign it in the first place? In order to identify it. She was instructed not to do that because many of the absentee ballots were fraudulent, and they knew that, and they didn't want to have a count of that.
Well, I don't think that Donald Trump or the Republican Party, for that matter, is capable of discontinuing their disinformation campaign.
On November 4, 2020, I was instructed to improperly predate the absentee ballots when the receipt date was actually was after November 3rd, 2020. Now, this is really significant because Justice Alito of the Supreme Court instructed Pennsylvania that any ballot that comes in after 8 o'clock on November 3rd, 2020, had to be put aside and not opened because there's a question as to its legality and its constitutionality. What she's telling you is that they blatantly disregarded that order, that they took ballots that were marked the 4th and the 5th and the 6th, and they marked it down for the 3rd in blatant disregard of the order of the United States Supreme Court. This is I don't know if she's a Democrat or Republican. I assume if she's working for the city of Detroit that she's a Democrat. I assume, but I may be wrong. She's a citizen. I've never met her, never coached her. And I'd like you to note that it's signed under penalties of perjury. We have 100 more of these. I can't show them to you because those people don't want to be harassed. They don't want to have their lives torn apart by the goons on the other side. We don't do that to them. They've done that to a lot of our people. They've done it for 4 years. And it's outrageous that it's tolerated, and it's tolerated because you condone it in the press, and you don't cover it, and you don't condemn it. And it shouldn't happen to a Republican or a Democrat. A lawyer shouldn't have to withdraw from a case because he's representing the President of the United States.
Washington Post noting that after Giuliani's bizarre press conference, which was filled with unsourced conspiracy theories and all sorts of other problems.
There are many more affidavits here. I'd like to read them all to you, but I don't have the time. You should have had the time and energy to go look for them. That's your job. Like it's my job to defend the president and to represent the president. It's your job to read these things and not falsely report that there's no evidence.
Even though there just hasn't been any evidence to back up these claims of widespread fraud.
Do you know how many affidavits we have in the Michigan case? 220 affidavits. They're not all public, but 8 of them are. 4 affiants here, those are people who give affidavits, report an incident that under any other circumstances would have been on the front page of all your newspapers if it didn't involve the hatred that you have, irrational, pathological hatred that you have for the president.
As President Trump refuses to acknowledge his election loss and makes baseless claims about voter fraud.
When it comes to the election, Republicans, congressional Republicans, don't have the evidence. They don't have the proof. They don't have anything. Neither does the president. Congressional Republicans are deliberately casting doubt on our elections for no other reason but fear of Donald Trump.
So given all of that, this ongoing Republican refusal to accept the reality of the election is really getting even harder to understand. State officials, both Republicans and Democrats, have all said there was no widespread fraud.
So the Department of Homeland Security just came out with a statement yesterday calling this the most secure election in American history.
There's just no there there. I mean, when his own Homeland Security Department rebukes these conspiracy theories as thoroughly as they did yesterday and as forcefully as they did, I think it's pretty clear that the president himself, they've yet to produce an ounce of evidence to support any of their baseless claims.
Conspiracy theories that nobody believes. And again, here's the tell, all right? Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, the rest of Trump's gang are lying through their teeth. Mark Meadows, they're all liars. They're all lying through their teeth, and they're telling you
things happen that never happened.
What they swear to is that at 4:30 in the morning, a truck pulled up to the Detroit Center where they were counting ballots.
No one has come up with any evidence of any fraud. No one's found a pickup truck with a bunch of ballots in the back.
The people thought it was food, so they all ran to the truck. It wasn't food. It was thousands and thousands of ballots. And the ballots were in garbage cans, they were in paper bags, they were in cardboard boxes, and they were taken into the center. They were put on a number of tables. At that time, they thought all the Republican inspectors had left, all but two had, and an employee of Dominion, who we will address a little bit later, Dominion. And here's what they jointly swear to, that every ballot that they could see, everything they could hear, these were ballots for Biden. When they saw a ballot, these were ballots only for Biden, meaning there was no down ticket, just Biden. Many of them didn't have anything on the outer envelope because these ballots were produced very quickly, very swiftly, and they're estimated to be a minimum of 60,000, maximum of 100,000. Many of them were triple counted.
I mean, they're trying to make an assertion that the election was rigged, and there's literally zero evidence.
I mean, what's happened to this country if we're going to let that happen? What happened to this country if we're going to cover that up? We let Al Gore carry on an election dispute longer than this one has been going on for one state and for Chad's. This happened in Pennsylvania. It happened in Michigan. Michigan probably right now, if I count up the affidavits, just one case alone, Trump v. Benson.
And beyond that, Jim, we're starting to see the Trump campaign and its surrogates dismiss their own lawsuits. We've now seen one lawsuit withdrawn. We saw another appeal withdrawn just the other day. That, I think, is a warning sign. You don't see that very often. When the Trump campaign is pulling back its own lawsuits, I think that's a flashing red light that they're in trouble.
A case that we dismissed today because that case was attempting to get the Wayne County Board of Supervisors to decertify. Well, they did. They decertified.
But there's just no substance there.
That case has 100 affidavits. And the 100 affidavits show essentially what I've talked to you about. Counting ballots improperly, counting them 3 and 4 times, having people vote 3 and 4 times, changing and backdating ballots to the point of at least 300,000 illegitimate ballots that we can specifically identify. The margin in Michigan was 146,121, and these ballots were all cast basically in Detroit that Biden won 80-20. So you see a change as a result of the election in Michigan if you take out Wayne County. So it's a very significant case. That is being raised in the case of Costantino versus the city of Detroit.
Yeah. There's another tell, though, and it has to do with Mitch McConnell, and it has to do with the Republicans, who we gave the benefit of the doubt to at the beginning of this process, even though none of them deserved the benefit of the doubt. Well, and we said this. Excuse me, I'll just finish and then you can go. We said this to Mitch McConnell, and it was, okay, we'll go along with you. Count all the votes. You're right. All the votes need to be counted. And yes, and then if you still, despite the fact you know, Mitch McConnell, that Joe Biden is going to be president of the United States because these numbers, this advantage is so big that Trump can never catch up, then go ahead and go through the legal process. If that makes you feel better, if that makes your base feel better, go through the legal process. We've done that. They have if they had any credible allegations of widespread fraud and abuse, it would have come forward, but they don't.
Wisconsin had a very small margin, 20,544 last time I looked. In Wisconsin, without going into great detail, very similar plan. Republicans shut out in the city of Milwaukee and also in Madison. Republicans almost uniformly shut out from the absentee process, not allowed to inspect, not allowed to look at the ballots. We have in Milwaukee and in the state of Wisconsin a much stricter law. Wisconsin doesn't allow mail-in ballots. They didn't buy into the big mail-in ballot situation. Wisconsin, when you look at their constitution, almost seems to not like absentee ballots. They state it's not a right, a privilege. And they have very, very strict procedures. And the strict procedure says that you can't be given an absentee ballot. You have to personally apply for it. It's illegal, basically, to solicit a vote.
Rudy Giuliani ensnarled in a conspiracy to undermine American democracy. Let me say this. This isn't part of the shock opera. I'm not shocked or stunned or deeply saddened. I know who's going to be president of the United States on January 20th, 2021.
So there are 60,000 ballots in Milwaukee County and 40,000 ballots in Madison that, as far as we can tell, and this is why we're auditing, because we have very good information, the numbers are going to come out about here, that don't have applications. Under the law of the state of Wisconsin, already decided, if there's no application for an absentee ballot, the absentee ballot is thrown away. This all happened in two places in Wisconsin. Didn't happen in northern Wisconsin. Didn't happen in Republican Wisconsin. Didn't happen in neutral Wisconsin, where there are an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. It happened in a place where the vote was 75, 80% for the Democrat. You take away any number of those, and that 20,000 lead disappears. In other words, if you count the lawful votes, Trump won Wisconsin by a good margin. Indeed, if you count the lawful votes in Pennsylvania, he won it by about 300,000 votes.
Rudy and Sidney Powell sounded like lunatics. The things he was saying were so demonstrably false.
Also, in the lawsuit filed in Wisconsin, which is really a petition because of their procedures, there were no inspectors provided for the count of the illegal ballots. There were numerous backdated ballots. We're just counting them now, run over into the thousands. And there were many precincts in which there was an overvote.
Trump is standing himself in historical fashion. He was already the worst president, in my view. Now he's probably the most unpatriotic person in the country's history. Trump had conceded and beginning to plan how to manage the dark winter that's coming for he and his family. And to have the president of the United States, who basically leads a cult now, he doesn't lead a modern political party. And to have so many members of that cult, some who believe it, in my view, most don't believe it. And that's even more of a sin. They know it's all BS, and they're going along with it because they're afraid of him. And it is pathetic, historically so.
Now let me explain to you what an overvote is, which is something you should have explained to the American people, because it's about the clearest circumstantial evidence of massive fraud that you can have. An overvote is if 200% of the people who are registered in a district vote. Think about that. 200% of the registered voters in a district vote. What does that mean? That means somebody voted twice. That means somebody who's not entitled to vote voted, an illegal, a person from another city or state, a person who's not registered. But what it means is that those are illegitimate votes. You don't have an overvote of 200% or 300%. You don't have an overvote of 100%. Most precincts don't have 100% turnout. In fact, classically, it's considered to be an overvote if you go over 80%. Well, in Michigan and Wisconsin, we have overvotes in numerous precincts of 150%, 200%, and 300%. One of the reasons why the two Republicans did not certify in Wayne, Michigan, Wayne County, Michigan, is because the overvote was so high, monstrously high. in about 2/3 of the precincts in the city of Detroit.
This is in Wayne County, Michigan, where they continue to be at odds about certifying in that county. We're getting an update there now. It's happening live. You're going to see it right here on News Now from Fox. Live, raw, oh yeah, and unfiltered as well.
Report of what the vote totals were. It was well after 3 o'clock before we received a 77-page report with the vote totals. We were not provided with a written copy of the executive summary that gives you a plus-minus report per precinct, so you can understand which precincts are in balance, which precincts are out of balance, and which precincts are out of balance unexplained. The key here is the unexplained precincts. I asked for a written copy of that report before we began the meeting. Was told it wasn't available at the time. Wayne County Director of Elections, Greg Marr, provided a staff report, and in that staff report, he gave us the executive summary verbally. If you were watching the Zoom call or in the meeting, you saw us frantically trying to write down the numbers of the precincts for the different communities in Wayne County and within Detroit. I did the math while I was sitting there, and it appeared that 70% of the Detroit absentee counting boards were out of balance unexplained. We have a repeat of the primary. The job of a canvasser is to make sure that you understand the differences between the number of ballots that are validly issued and received and the number of votes totaled. If there is a difference, you need to have an explanation. That is the job of the canvass. That did not occur in the 2 weeks that we had to canvass. That is why I voted no for the certification. Not just for Detroit, not to take votes away from anyone. It was to give the state the additional 10 days to do their investigation to get the answers to why the balances didn't match. Immediately upon voting no, my other board members made statements and immediately brought in the words racism and partisanship. My intent with my no vote was to make sure that we got the answers so that the voters of Detroit can have recountable precincts. It has nothing to do with black or white. After commentary from my board members and legal counsel informing me that I didn't have discretion to vote no, when I believe the documentation was not complete and accurate. My question is, if a board of canvasser doesn't have discretion to vote yes or no, why is there even a board of canvassers? We continued on with public comment. I endured about 2 hours worth of commentary, most of it calling me a racist, some of them getting personal and bringing my daughter into the situation and announcing to the world what city I live in and what school my daughter attends. During that public commentary, Vice Chair Kinloch pulled me into the back of the warehouse and offered me a compromise. He said he'd been on the phone with Democrats all throughout the state trying to find a solution to help certify the results in Wayne County. He assured me that he had confirmation from Governor Whitmer that they would be able to get an independent audit done to clarify the precincts that were unexplained in their differences. I asked him to draft up a motion because there were a few complications in exactly how we were going to describe an independent audit, independent comprehensive audit, to answer those questions. A softball audit of basically redoing the canvas may not catch it. It needs to be comprehensive. We went back out to the tables in the public. Vice Chair Kinloch met with the rest of the board members individually as to not cross any lines with the Open Meetings Act, and we came back, reconvened, and had a vote. Unfortunately, at that time, the Zoom conference on the laptop had been muted, and the public that was watching online was not able to hear the commentary with that motion being made. I saw an opportunity with that motion that Vice Chair Kinloch made to get to the bottom of the unexplained precincts. A comprehensive audit would attain the job that the canvass needs to do, and that is why I decided to vote yes on that motion. When that motion was passed, at the later point in the evening, we wrapped up the meeting shortly thereafter. With the amount of angry comments and threats that were coming in, I ended up leaving for my safety. I want to be clear that the documentation, the signatures on the final statement of votes that were voted to be certified, I did not physically sign. If there is a signature on that document, it was my signature stamp used without my approval. I do not have a copy of that document at this time to confirm if they put the signature stamp on it or not. It was brought to my attention that minutes after we took the vote, Secretary Benson was on TV saying that anything that we did in the motion was non-binding and that she wasn't agreeing to it. I made a good faith effort in that compromise with Vice Chair Kinloch and was misled. Right now, the State Board of Canvassers has the issue at their hands. I have provided them with a copy of my affidavit rescinding my vote. That motion to certify was contingent upon the comprehensive audit that needs to be done before there is a certification by the state. An audit after the fact is not going to answer those unexplained precincts, and they still will not be recountable. Another point that I want to make is that this is not about the presidential election. Most often the recounts are going to come for local candidates, city councils, school boards, mayors. When you're in a local community and you file for a recount and you walk in and half of the precincts can't be recounted because there's no answer as to why they don't match, that candidate and all the voters in that local district are disenfranchised. And with that, I guess we can start taking questions.
Which means magically 2 and 3 times the number of registered voters turned out to vote. In fact, we have precincts in which 2 times the number of people who live there, including children, voted. That's absurd. The frustration of this is, what I'm describing to you is a massive fraud. It isn't a little teeny one. It isn't, 100 votes switched here or there. Georgia, we're about to file a major lawsuit in Georgia. That'll be filed probably tomorrow. I don't need to go through it. Virtually the same things I've told you before. In the city of Atlanta, Republicans were not allowed to watch the absentee mail-in ballot process. Inspections completely cast aside. And we have numerous double voters. We have numerous out-of-state voters. And we have specific evidence of intimidation and changes of vote. That'll all be in the lawsuit that comes out tomorrow. Arizona is a state that we're looking at very, very carefully. And the state that we're looking at that would surprise you is we have very, very significant amount of fraud allegations in the state of New Mexico. And we have a significant number of allegations in the state of Virginia.
Most rank and file are silently enabling the president's false fraud claims.
And Donald Trump can just keep lying, but he'll have less of a megaphone to yell into once he's no longer the president on January 20th.
We more than double the number of votes needed to overturn the election in terms of provable illegal ballots. All you got to do to find out if I'm misleading you at all is to look at the lawsuits. Look what's alleged. Look at the affidavits. Maybe we can supply more affidavits. In order to do it, I have to get permission from the people. But in the materials I have here, there are at least 10 that come from citizens. We have 1,000 at least, and we're getting more every day. It's enough to overturn any election. It's disgraceful what happened. We cannot let this happen to us. We cannot allow these crooks, because that's what they are, to steal an election from the American people. They elected Donald Trump. They didn't elect Joe Biden. Joe Biden is in the lead because of the fraudulent ballots, the illegal ballots that were produced and that were allowed to be used after the election was over. Give us an opportunity to prove it in court, and we will.
Giving the right message matters.